Dearest St Mary's, Joburg, we send you so much love from the choir of St Martin in the Field, and we bring to you a beautiful piece by Gibbons to share and say thank you for all you bring, and we can't wait to see you soon. And we had such a lovely time with you when we came to see you a couple of years ago, and we can't wait to do the same again. So much love from all the team at St Martin's in the Field Choir.
Almighty and everlasting God, and everlasting God, mercifully Lord of our infirmities, mercifully Lord of
Good afternoon, brothers and sisters in Christ. Good morning to those who are in the other parts of the world. I greet you in the wonderful name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Once again, it is a great pleasure for you and each one of us to join us today for our final session. Thank you to St. Martin's Choir for creating this special recording for us today as we come to the last of our Lenten HeartEdge conversations today. We appreciate all the links with St. Martin's, but this one with music as shared culture is especially important. As we remain separated by COVID, we can remain connected in these ways thanks to technology and the musical gift. Now, with that beautiful prelude, today we welcome our two speakers, that we have the Reverend Tim from the Netherlands and Reverend Lorenzo from the USA. Today's session will focus on HeartEdge global perspectives as we look at how implementation happens in other parts of the world. As per the norm, we will have each speaker giving an input, after which both have given, we shall then have a conversation. I wish to encourage you to post your questions, post your comment via YouTube, and so that you can actively participate in today's session, which is very exciting. Our first speaker, therefore, for today would be Reverend Tim. Reverend Tim is 45 years old, married, and the father of a daughter of 9 years and a son 6 years. He is now in ministry for almost 20 years. He is an ordained minister in the Protestant Church of the Netherlands, which is the mainstream denomination comparable with what Anglicanism is in England and beyond. In planting a brand new church in Amsterdam inner city, he was also involved in that initiative. Over the last couple of years, he built relationships with many non-Christians. The classic temples of worship and services or small groups do not work very well for these people or for such congregations. Therefore, he created formats like stand-up theology, church to go, or worship by WhatsApp. And of course, we will share more as he continues to share. So brothers and sisters, join me in welcoming Reverend Tim to give his input and share with us today. Reverend Tim, it's a great pleasure to host you from the soil of Africa. I hand over to you to share your thoughts and your message today. Welcome, brother.
Thank you, Dean, for your friendly words of introduction, and hello, everyone. It's a great honor to have the opportunity to address, I think, the first South African audience in my lifetime. I never had the opportunity to visit your beautiful country, so hopefully that will come one day. But of course, there are long-standing relationships between our two nations, between the Netherlands and between South Africa. It's been a long relationship with its good times and with its difficult times, and I'm very happy. We are very happy to see what the Lord has done in your country over the last couple of decades. While you're still in all sorts of difficulties, as we are in our country as well, I'm looking forward to a new chapter. In the relationship of our two nations, and I think we as churches can give a good example of how to behave among brothers and sisters. So on that base, I'm very happy to speak a few words to you. I think it's helpful to understand at least a little bit of my context. So I share a couple of numbers with you, only the most needy ones. Amsterdam, of course, a big city, but not that big. It's about 1 million inhabitants. So it's way smaller than, for example, Joburg. It's way smaller than Los Angeles. And I think it's also important to understand that now almost 70% of the Amsterdam population, almost 70% treats themselves as non-religious, which is quite a staggering number if you compare that to South Africa, I think, but also to the USA. It's very high, and I think that 30% of the people that are calling themselves religious, most of them come from other parts of the world to our city. So especially the western part, the non-religious people are the number is huge, is enormous. I think it's helpful to understand, and I'm proud of my city. Let's be open about that. I'm a very proud inhabitant of Amsterdam, and I'm very grateful for the things we partly invented and gave them to the rest of the world. I think, for example, about liberalism. I think already in the 17th century here in Amsterdam, people really treated themselves as free citizens, free from bondage, free from oppression. And they shared this idea with the rest of the world. And we also did a lot of things on the field of individualism in its best forms, that every human being is of infinite worth. Ideas like that. I think that's part of our heritage. In that sense, Amsterdam is still very much stamped by Christianity. But then you have to say that that I think we're also a sort of example how easily you can turn these good gifts into its opposite, and then they become idols in itself. If liberalism is a thing in itself, if individualism is a thing in itself, it's a sort of counterpart of what is originally how it is originally meant. So that's my context. There's a couple of numbers, and then I try to give you a brief sketch of what I'm doing. Actually, I'm in the first stage of a sort of church planting experiment in Amsterdam's inner city. I did a lot of experiments over the last 3 or 4 years. I made a plan for the next 5 years. We'll launch the community hopefully on the 1st of July, if COVID restrictions allow us to do that. And then we have in mind something like a journey for the next 5 years. So I'm really in a very exciting period of time. So what do we like to work on? And here the 4 C's will be a helpful model to understand what I'm doing. First of all, our first C is not that much the C of culture, as they would say it in St. Martin's. We slightly adapt that first C a bit, and then it is the C of content. So we are busy with all sorts of content, like every journalist tries to do that, like every vlogger tries to do that. And an example of the content that I make is I created a sort of format that is called stand-up theology. I'm an ordained minister. I know how to behave in an official liturgy, and I like that. Sometimes I do that, but I think it was a very good decision a couple of years ago that I said I can try to give the best sermons I can create every week, but most of my targeted audience will never show up in any official worship services because they're not used to that. They have no interest in it. They have other things to do at 10 o'clock Sunday morning. So then I say let's try to think the other way around. And before COVID, I had I think I made 15 programs in total on themes like stress, or love in times of Tinder, or fear of missing out, or money. And then my audience shows up. They literally buy a ticket for that. So it's very much in the way they go to the theater or to a concert. And then they also buy the right, so to say, to have their opinion about the things that I'm doing, if it is of good quality, if I meet up their expectations, and so on. And then I'm not standing in the pulpit. I'm not wearing any official clothes, but I just try to speak like every theater maker tries to address his audience. Of course, you make use of some good jokes, but then they also understand that the minister is doing all this theater stuff. So they expect me to use biblical stories, and they expect me to touch the spiritual level. And to my surprise, this is a very helpful concept. And I think a couple of hundreds of people are regular visitors in the time that we can organize these events live. Another example of content is that I, in this 2 weeks, the weeks just before Easter, there is a WhatsApp group here in my smartphone with about 100 people who gave me permission to send them an update every day. And what I do is I make little podcasts, and I simply follow the story of the Gospel of Mark, chapter 14 and 15, the whole Jesus journey. And every day I make a very short podcast, only 4 minutes, and apply a part of the Jesus story to actual circumstances. Now, I think 70% of the people in this WhatsApp group do not see themselves as Christians. Most of them are not familiar with the Jesus story, especially not in all its details. It's absolutely amazing how they respond, and how they share their thoughts with me about the things that I may say on a daily basis. So, well, I think that's just an example of how content could look like in my situation. Let's go to the second one, a little bit shorter. The second C is the C of charity. And in our situation, that means that I do have a colleague. She's called Miriam. And Miriam officially entitles herself as the neighborhood pastor. And that means that from the church building where where our places in the inner city, she makes all sorts of connections to neighborhood organizations. And she always starts with questions. Who are you? How is it going? Do you need anything? Is it possible to partner? Have you ever thought about the church coming along to help you in a food project, or to join you in the empowerment of women in the area where we are? There are all sorts of drugs problems, and we found out that women are key, the mothers are key, the sisters are key, and that empowerment of women can be of great help for more for a better social climate and more connection to people. So that's our part of being there, not only to produce content for all sorts of people in the city. Charity means a real connection with the neighborhood around us, and try to be of help. And most of the time we simply listen. So the thing that Sam calls being with, I think it's really there. Most of the time it simply means be there and listen, because people have so many stories. Then there's a third C, and in the 4C model, that's the C of community. Now, there is not a community at this point. As I said, I like to launch a community around the 1st of July. And here's the thing that I have in mind. And it's funny, because the model that I try to sketch you, I've never seen it anywhere in the world. And that means it's quite stupid, or it could be something helpful or original. We have to find out in the next 5 years. So the model that I have in mind is, can I bring people together in one community, but on 3 very different levels? The basic level would be something like doing good, simply doing good. Can I inspire people to do good? Can I help them to reflect on in which ways they can contribute to their city? Can I motivate them by biblical stories, other stories? So and that would mean everybody can join. So everybody who's interested in the question how to be a good person is welcome right into the church community. Then I have in mind to create a second level within the same community, and the second level is something like it's created for the people who are on the search and have questions about the meaning of life, or even about spirituality. Well, that's not a totally different planet than the first one, but there are all sorts of differences. So I think some people from the first level also like the second level, but there are also people on the first level doing good who have no real spiritual interest at this point of their lives. And in my understanding, that's totally fine and good. But the second level should be there for seekers, spiritually interested people. And then I've in mind that there should be a third level within the same community. And for that level, I'm very inspired by Richard Carter's book about monasticism in the city. So Richard Carter is one of the colleagues of Sam at St. Martin's. So the third level could be something like an urban order that's basically all about worshiping Jesus. So not too much about all sorts of questions about God or election or whatever, but simply worshiping Jesus and who is he and what does worship mean. So my dream is that you can let me say that you can target 3 different groups of people within one community, so that nobody has the feeling, oh, I'm not good enough for the third level. No, it's fine that there is a third level, but they're fine and good with the first level. And I think the proof of the pudding is in how to make connections between these groups, how to fix it that they really feel themselves part of one community, even as they know that there are two other groups which they do not enter on a daily basis. Well, maybe this sounds a little bit weird. It's just a template that we want to try out, and we'll see how far we can go. But I think many of the theology of HeartEdge and of St. Martin's is very helpful to think through this thing. So last C is about commerce. Very short. There's a lot to say about commerce, but my lesson as a church planter and as a pastor is you have to think about every euro in my context that comes in, and you have to think about every euro that comes out. And if you do that every month, and if you get advice from good people from the business a couple of times a year, you can be very smart in how to run a church as a social enterprise. I didn't expect a couple of years ago that also this C, so the commercial C, is so helpful to integrate it into the model that you're working on. So even if we start with content, work hard for a community, do charity as good as we can. Also the commercial thing, how to fund this whole operation, it's a very important one. Well, let me thanks for your listening, and I'm looking forward to the presentation of Lorenzo, and then afterwards the Q&A time that we will have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed, Reverend Tim, for your input and contribution, but particularly for giving us a contextual global understanding of HeartEdge, but an essence of mission and ministry. And I'm particularly fascinated by the whole aspect of inclusiveness. Even those who are unchurched, or they say they're non-religious, but in your approach of ministry, you try and reach all. And I think we have a lot to learn in our own context. But let me hold questions for now. Brothers and sisters, we will then move on from Netherlands. This jet we have goes very fast. We will move on all the way to the United States of America to welcome Reverend Lorenzo. Reverend Lorenzo is a founding director of the Tri-Tank, the experimental lab for church growth and innovation. He is responsible for the entire process of development and implementation of experiments for innovation in the church. Prior to launching the Tri-Tank, Reverend Lorenzo was Chief Development Officer for the Episcopal Diocese of Los Angeles. He also served as the pastor on behalf of Bishop at St. John's Episcopal Church in San Benito, and as an assistant associate at St. Athanasius Episcopal Church at the Cathedral Center of St. Paul's in Los Angeles. He studied at the General Theological Seminary in New York, where he earned his Master of Divinity degree. Before entering seminary, Reverend Lorenzo was president and CEO of Seraphic Fire and Firebird Chamber Orchestra, Miami's professional choral and orchestral ensemble. He was also the Miami program director for the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, responsible for a substantial grant portfolio and the launch of the Knights Arts Challenge. Having been general manager for Radio Activa, Hispanic Radio, as well as editor and director of operations for Miami community newspapers. Reverend Lorenzo has vast experience in media and marketing. He has been a frequent speaker at community events, to groups on development, community involvement, the arts, business strategy, and marketing. It's ironical, then he learns to be a priest. The world is very exciting. Reverend Lorenzo, it gives me great pleasure all the way from the USA to welcome you so that you could share with us the global perspective from the US perspective as we continue our mission and ministry implementation within the 4 C's of HeartEdge. I therefore welcome you, and it is a great pleasure to have you and give thanks to God. I now hand over to you to share with us your own experiences.
Thank you very much, Dean. And it is indeed a pleasure to be with you. It is a morning here in California. It is only 8 o'clock in the morning. So you're in the future. So you're doing part of this work in the future as well. It is really an honor to be able to be with you. I am sorry only that I'm not in person and getting to know Joe Berg and the rest of the folks at St. Mary's Cathedral. I would love to be there in person with you also. Greetings on this Palm Sunday, this Passion Sunday. Ironically enough, it was exactly 2 years ago today, Palm Sunday, when I was at St. Martin's in the Fields in London, where I was meeting with Sam and with Jonathan and some of the other members from HeartEdge to bring some of the work that they were doing so well that we were becoming so enamored with back to the US. As you mentioned, I do run TriTech, the experimental laboratory for church growth. Although I must say, it never quite sounded as good as when you just said it. So I'm going to get you to record that so I can just play that to people and to like my friends every time I want to say who I am. So TriTech, what we do is we try to look ahead. We try to use foresight to look into the future to where the Spirit might be leading us, where God's church can be headed. And as we launched TriTank a few years ago, we did not have a framework. And so we looked around, we were like, okay, are there business frameworks that we could use? Or should we use the scientific method as a framework for the work that we're gonna do? And then we discovered the work of HeartEdge and the work of Sam Wells. And his framework is brilliant in a couple of ways. One, it is incredibly replicable. Depending, no matter what your own context is, you can take the 4 C's and apply them to your context. So it is this global perspective that's very much able to be made local. So that's brilliant and great. But perhaps even deeper than that is the fact that it has a deeply rooted theology from Jesus. And in all of the work that we do, no matter where we're doing, whether it's in the Netherlands, whether it's in Johannesburg, whether it's in Russia, we are doing this work for the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so we must always be grounded in that and reminded of that in everything that we do. And so we're like, this is amazing. We're going to take this framework and we're going to use this for our experiments. We're going to do experiments in commerce and in community and in culture and in compassion. And that seems like a really cool. And that way, if we would be offering a balanced portfolio for congregations to look at it and be like, oh, I want to try that experiment. That's something I want to try out because I think that that's something I want to do in my community. So let me give you an example of some of the experiments that we do. When it comes, for example, to commerce, we are working with as most of us know, who have actual physical buildings. They're not used most of the week. The largest part of our building is the nave, the church itself, which for most of the week just sits there empty. Are there ways that we could repurpose that space during the week? So we have a congregation here in California that we're helping them out to try to use that space to rent out the space to arts groups so that they would have rehearsal space and thus they would be earning some revenue from it, but they would also be welcoming people. That's an easy one. That's a simple one. We also have kitchens, and in many ways, they're really good kitchens that we have because they're large by size. So we have a congregation in San Diego here in California that they're lending their congregation to, it's called Mama Africa's Catering. And what they're going to do is they're going to cook meals on Sunday night and deliver them to people. So you place your order by Wednesday, you get the menu on Tuesday, you place your order by Wednesday, and on Sunday night, you don't cook. They come and deliver the meal to you. But the difference is that you're not just getting a meal from a local restaurant, you're also supporting a ministry. You're supporting the entrepreneurs who are doing the catering job. You're supporting the church and its ministry, and you don't have to cook on a Sunday night. So that's like win, 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 and you get a great African meal. And that's like total win for me. So Those are the types of ways that we look at experiments in when we're talking about the commerce part. When we talk about congregation, and I'm so glad that Reverend Tim brought this up, and the dean that you picked up on this about the inclusiveness, trying to reach out beyond the people that are just with us. We discovered that Facebook has this incredible power. uh, I won't even get started as to how that power can be used for nefarious means and purposes. Certain other countries trying to interfere with elections and stuff like that. That's not the point. But they know so much about each individual. And so we said, is there a way of reaching people who are open to the Christian message, but who are not in church on Sunday? A lot of people are open, and Tim even said it's like they just have other things on Sunday morning at 10 a.m. So is there a way that we could reach those people and say, hey, we want to talk to you about this message? And so we created a page of people that are into social justice. It turns out that that message really resonates with a group of people who are into the Christian message, but not necessarily at church on Sundays. And we said, is there a way that we can create this group? And we did. We created a group that now has about 5,000 people. From that group, Facebook allows you to do what they call lookalike. In other words, they find other people that have statistical similarities to those people. They can go really deep into statistical analysis of those people. And all that. So we created this page. We have 5,000 people. We have what we call the DNA, right? We can look at the analysis of those people. And we did an invitation on a Friday night to an event. And in 4 days, we just broadcasted through Facebook a commercial message that we did to those people that were similar, that were not associated with the nearby churches, that did not know about the event. And we just put this message out there. And we spent very little money, and we got 187 people who had never heard of the Episcopal Church to show up to an event that they had never heard about. That's the power of Facebook. These are people who are open to the message. And if we bring them this message of Jesus, they respond really well to that message. They just, many times, I think society has sold them this message that Charles Taylor, the philosopher, would say, they've become disenchanted with the world. And what the church really brings to them is this enchantment about life, this mystery of life. So that's how we do our experiments. And we have about 65 experiments that we've done so far. And we just have a lot of fun. I encourage anyone who wants to learn more about our experiments, you can go to tritank.org and you can find out about them there. But we said, how do we also bring the movement of HeartEdge to the United States? How do we bring these 4 C's? Because they are a good and a very replicable sort of framework for people to use. How do we do it? And what we did is we brought HeartEdge and we said, okay, we're going to pay, it's not a lot, but we're going to pay for people to be able to join HeartEdge and become part of the network so that they can be a part of this and learn from each other. And as we were doing this, we also decided that we needed a further framework for how we were going to organize ourselves in the United States. When we got involved, I think they had like 3 or 4 members of HeartEdge, and we're one of the founding members. And we said, we need to grow it here in the US. We want to do more because this is a good movement. This can really have an impact on the church. And so we followed, much like Sam, we followed the framework of Jesus. And we said, okay, Jesus had the crowds, then he had the 12. At the foot of the cross, there were 3. No, I'm sorry. At the garden, there were 3. And then at the foot of the cross, there was the 1. Right? So can we sort of follow that framework? So the crowds are the global HeartEdge network. When you join HeartEdge, when people become a member of HeartEdge, you are invited to conversations like this one, enriching conversations that really give you a very practical sense of the theology of Jesus in the world today, right? At the heart of the community, but reaching to the edges to those that God has, that the community has forgotten. When it comes to the 12, we do trainings. So we actually do trainings on each one of the 4 C's, and we invite congregations and people to come and learn. This is how you can do very practically the commerce part, or this is how you can do the culture part, or this is how you can, so we do that. We do once a quarter, we do a training for people to learn about the 4 C's and really live into them. And then when it comes to the 3 at the garden, what we do is coaching. We put people in groups of 3 and we become, imagine, Dean, if it was like you and Tim and I were in a group Every time, and let's say we get together once a month, just by virtue of us knowing that we're going to get together, we're going to hold each other accountable. So it'd be like, oh, I'm going to be meeting with the dean. I better do the stuff I said I was going to do, or otherwise I'm going to feel bad. And Tim's going to be like the one that wins. No, no, no. So we become like accountable to each other, and we help each other when we're not. We coach each other. We just sort of like, we're each other's support system to get things done. And then when it comes to the one, we actually do match people for mentoring relationships, where one large congregation, perhaps a very well resourced, like a cathedral or something, or a major church in New York City, can help a small church in a rural state or in a rural part of Alabama. And they can mentor each other and be like, how would you do this? What would you do? How would you do it? And they can handhold each other. So that's sort of the framework that we came. Again, it's not as richly developed as Sam Wells's Being With, and but nevertheless, it's a good framework of Jesus, of the crowds, the 12, the 3, and the 1. And that made it easy for us to create a network here. We now have about 70 members in the United States, and we're trying to continue to grow it. And just to, this is a movement. This is about people doing the work of the gospel in the world today. And that's where I want to finish. We say in our the HeartEdge USA website, and it's big bold letters. We have a video from Sam explaining the 4 C's, but it really is about living God's future now. When we talk about the kingdom of God, it isn't just about some far off, distant thing. It is about something that we can make in our world today if we really apply ourselves to it. And our work is exciting because we get to bring the enchantment back into people's lives when they discover Jesus. And as we enter this most holiest of weeks, let next Sunday not go by and us. The difference between, here's what wisdom is. Wisdom is knowledge plus transformation. If we know that Jesus is the Son of God and rose from the dead, then we must be transformed. And that's when we become wise to this world. So with that, I will turn it back to you. And I'm glad to enter into this conversation. Thank you, Dean.
Thank you very much, Reverend Lorenzo. Both you guys, it is mind-blowing sharing. But what I pick up from both of you, you know, the Great Commission, Jesus said, go and make disciples. But it seems as we talk under the HeartEdge congregation, it seems to me, actually as a church, we became a church that waited. We didn't understand when Jesus says, go and make disciples, go into the world, go into the field. We stayed in church and waited for people to come. How do we transform the mentality and the theology of our churches to understand ourselves that we've been sent not to remain in our own global contexts as we look at the creative missions you've been talking about? How do we help our churches to understand that commandment by Christ?
Tim, do you want to begin on that, or?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. I think it all starts with simply repeating the sentence that you just said, Dean. So we have to remind our churches, but we also have to remind ourselves that the word "go" is part of the challenge that Jesus gave to us. My second thought would be that it's very helpful to figure out what this big word, this big command, go, to figure out what it means personally for you. So I had to figure out that a couple of years ago, it meant to me, leave your parish, leave your pulpits, go into the city. And that's part of my story. And it's an intriguing story to many people. But I think every Christian can figure out what the word "go," what it means to him or to her. I think we as churches should challenge people and facilitate people to find out how that looks like, because it's not hard, and actually it's fun if you do the things that are part of the talents that God gave you. It's not an incredible command. It's just being among the people that you like to be, or doing the cooking things that you like to do, or whatever. I think that's all in that simple but important word, go.
And so much of it, Tim, as you talk about, is when you go, it's so much easier to invite someone to go with you when you go. If you're just going to sit back and wait for people to come and wonder why isn't anyone here, well, would you do that if you had some? Imagine that you had whatever your most favorite candy is or something, and you had an endless supply of it. It would never, ever run out, ever. Whatever your most favorite thing is. Would you not want to share that with your friends, knowing that well, that's the economy of God. That's the economy of Jesus. We have this thing called love, and the world, here's where I think it is. We see that the world can be different. We see injustice and say, it doesn't have to be that way. We see inequality and say, it doesn't have to be that way. And it is upon us to not just sit there and be, well, it doesn't have to be that way, but to go out and say, we can make a better world. Don't we want a better world? Don't we want to have the joy of the gospel in us? And that's what I think drives us. If we really believe, I preach this every Easter Sunday. So here, I'm about to preach my next Sunday's sermon to you right now. So it doesn't mean you don't have to go to church next Sunday. It's important that you do, but here it is. Imagine that that you have a job you don't like, and that you don't have a lot of money, and that you don't have a car, and so you always have to take public transportation, and you're taking the metro and everything. You're just like, and you live like 20 in a house in a one bedroom. It's not the world's best, and you don't have a lot of food. And then all of a sudden you bump into somehow millions and millions of dollars. Very next day, you still go to the job you don't like and still live in a house with no food and with no electricity. No, you would change your life. You would make it better, right? Because you have encountered that. We won that lottery. We have Jesus resurrecting from the dead. We have conquered death. So if we don't go out and share that with the world, it's on us. Why are we still living the same life of misery that we don't like? That's, I think, where sometimes we get lost.
Yeah. No, thank you. I think I was very fascinated by the creative ways in which mission is done in both your context. But one of the things you said, Tim, especially under compassion and charity, in your own context, what you drew with was that you actually look at connecting with your neighborhood, but you use a very important word, being with and listening to the needs of the world. At times, the way we've communicated our gospel, we have not been compassionate because somehow we believe we've got the answers. Somehow we believe we know what is right. How do we help under the rubric of compassion, each of our churches or our congregations or us, to understand the significance and importance of just being in the ministry of presence? Just be with. How do we become, in a world faced with so much social ills, global pandemics, injustice in the world, there's conflicts everywhere, there's pain. How can we become a church that is present and that is being with people? Or how is it happening in your own context?
Well, first of all, it takes, I think it takes a lot of courage, and I speak from a very personal perspective. So I'm a typical middle class type of guy, stemming from a middle class family, no upper class, no underclass, typically middle class. I realized that the first 25 or 30 years of my life, I think I only met middle class people, and then also especially from the white type of color or the reformed sort of belief. And that it's easy. It's easy to hang around with a lot of people who are so much like yourself. Then you tend to idealize. Oh, it would be nice to be in touch with other people, and then you put your first steps on that path. And it's yes, it is fun, but it's most of the time it's also hard work to really understand people from so many different backgrounds. That's the path that I learned myself with a lot of trial and error. And I think that is of great help in the road that we're doing now in our project in that part of Amsterdam where we work. Most of the people there you cannot understand if you do not listen very carefully, and if you're not quite open-minded. I did an interesting program on drugs, and not on the addiction part, but for the many people in Amsterdam that use take drugs now and then, just to be in a higher state of mind or whatever. I didn't do it myself any time in my life. It was weird for me to listen to many people. Why do you do that? Do you want to share your experiences with me? And then in the end, there was much more understanding from my side for what they were really looking for, and that there is no need for me to say yes to drugs or to say no to drugs, at least not on this level. I'm in their life to ask for the underlying questions. What do you long for? What do you hope for? Well, that's part of my journey.
Yeah. Reverend Lorenzo?
I am a huge fan of John Pritchard, the former Bishop of Oxford. He wrote a book on the life and work of a priest. And one of the things he says that's the main job of a priest is, which I think is not just an ordained priest, but the priesthood of all believers,
Yes.
is to be present to the pain of the world. This world will have pain. There is nothing I could do to take that away. And many times when we encounter that pain, we have this instinct to want to make it better. We don't like to see someone else suffer. And so we're driven to want to say something that will make it better, that will take away some of that pain. And Bishop Pritchard just says, just be present. Don't say anything, just be present. Holding space with someone when they are suffering is one of the greatest gifts you can give them, because you're just there with them in their pain. You're not saying you shouldn't be in pain. You're not saying this pain can go away if you just say the right things or say the right prayers or believe. It's just basically saying, I know you're in pain and I'm right here with you. And that is one of the greatest gifts. And Dean, you're absolutely right that our church has lost that ability to just be present to people in pain, that ministry of presence. And that's what Sam talks so well about in his the Nazareth Manifesto book, about being with people. The largest part of Jesus's ministry, 90% of it, he was just with people. He was just sharing with them. And so that's where I think we kind of sometimes lose a little bit. It's like, we want to be such perfect Christians that we could be like saints. And we forget that being the best Christian is just being the best Lorenzo. Being the best Lorenzo and the best friend I can be, and just being present to people, that's being the best Christian, just loving people where they are.
Yeah. And I think that's what we draw from the ministry of Christ. If you're looking in the Gospels, wherever there was a need, he was just there. He was present in the Cana of Galilee. He was present for Mary and Martha in their hour of need. And perhaps that's what the world needs. Perhaps the world doesn't need our sermons. It needs our presence. Perhaps we should stop preaching and leave the gospel out where we are. Oh, let me not preach.
So you've heard my sermons, huh?
I've already summarized it for you. But let me ask you further. I want to take this. We've spoken about the compassion and the congregation, and now I want us to move to the area of culture. Just to share within, how do we use culture as a tool of mission and ministry? And let's not forget that ministry of presence as well. How do we use culture, the arts, the music, as ideas to reimagine? So how do we use the gifts that God has given us? Within our congregations, there's so much talent, there's so much gift, so that evangelism and preaching the gospel is not only the pulpit on a Sunday, but we use the creative gifts. How is that happening in your own context as you creatively communicate God's word and God's mission?
I'd love to share with you two examples real quick, if I may. One is particularly for young people. If we were to have some plays, some theatrical performances where young people get to act, when an actor enters into the roles, they could see themselves as the other character. So if we really want people to learn what Tim was just saying about, he's only lived a middle class life and he only for the first 25 years only knew those people. It's unusual, for example, if there was a teenager in the United States that they would understand what apartheid was in South Africa during that time. However, if there's a play that they could go into it and embody the character, then they're giving an opportunity to see themselves as that. So that's the power of art, is when we get to see ourselves in another picture, in another thing, and experience it. So that's one of the most beautiful ways of doing it, is by actually taking the arts and allowing young people to embody those other characters that they otherwise would not have an experience about. Another and much more practical way, we have an experiment where we call it, it's an evangelism theater tour. And we have a small comedy show that we tour around to churches. And it's an opportunity for people to invite their friends. Here's what's funny, right? We have no problem saying, hey, Tim, hey, Dean, you guys want to come? I'm going to go to the theater. You guys want to come to the movies, or you guys want to come to the theater? Come along. Let's go see the movie together. We would have no problem doing that. But however, if I were to say like, hey, you want to come to church with me? I'd feel like, oh, that's just weird. I may have crossed a line somewhere. That seems like a line too far to have gone. So we said, well, what if we bring the theater into the church and have people invite their friends to come and see? So it's a comedy, so that people will feel good, and we make it a very opening. And if nothing else, people will be like, hey, remember we saw that show at that church, St. Mary's, and it was so much fun. And maybe the next time they're thinking about, maybe we should go to church on Easter or on Christmas, they'll be like, why don't we go to that place, that St. Mary's Cathedral? They were fun there and they had a good concert, or the show was good. So it encourages people to get to know the congregation, even if they're not a member yet. It's a sort of low barrier to bring them in.
Yeah. So there's more creative ways for mission. Reverend Tim?
Yeah, let me add one story from my context. I was not too familiar with David Bowie, the big British performer, till the day he died. And then I read so many articles in the newspapers about him, and I was fascinated by it. And I said to myself, I lived my life partly under a stone. I miss David Bowie. And then I started to study his life a bit, his biography. I listened to a lot of his songs. And then a couple of months later, I made such a stand-up program, stand-up theology, all about his swan song, his latest song, which had all the themes of cross and resurrection in it. And I think this is just an example that many people do not understand you immediately if you quote from the Bible, but if you honor one of their heroes, and if you do that in an authentic way. So it was no act from me. I really admired Bowie in his performances, but then you can build a great bridge to communicate the big questions about suffering. Is death the end of everything? And why did he call that song Lazarus? Why is there the story of the guy coming back from the grave, and has that something to do with Easter? And now and then it's still helpful. So I always can make a joke. I miss David Bowie, but then I try to play with the idea that in some respects I understand Bowie maybe a little bit better than many people in my audience. This is a way of honoring culture, and I would also say on the deepest level honoring God, because he doesn't only send good preachers and theologians like Luther or whoever, but he also sends a lot of great people in the arts, in the movies, in the theater. And we as a church can use it in all sorts of ways. I think that's one of the great gifts for the church of today.
Yeah.
And food, don't forget food. Food is a good cultural way of getting people to know, to cross the border, to get to know someone else, is through the stomach is a great way. Hey, come, let's share a meal together and we'll get to know each other better and you'll get to know my culture through my food. It's a wonderful way as well.
I will say it's a date after COVID, Lorenzo. You promised me that food and cultural food. So when
I am there. Count on me.
you know, in our own context in Africa and Southern Africa, the arts as well, and particularly music, plays a critical role in the spiritual formation and nourishment of God's people, particularly within our townships. Like now, because it's COVID, and they say no singing, everybody is angry because singing is so powerful and it lifts our spirits up, you know. And the challenge is that we have left it only to the choir to sing instead of the choir to lead the community in worship. And I think as a community, we need to understand ourselves as part of the narrative of God, as part of this story of God. But I want to move to a question which one of our readers has posted here. What does being with look like when it comes to culture? I'm going to talk about commerce now, so I won't add the commerce now. But what does being with look like when it comes to culture and commerce?
Well, my first answer would be something like this: that I'm deeply impressed by all the needs that COVID has created, and I'm not talking about South Africa now, but also about my own context. Even in a quite wealthy city like Amsterdam, the needs in many respects are quite big, and one of the biggest needs is in the cultural world. No performances anymore, no money anymore for a lot of people. I made so many walks through the parks of Amsterdam just with one or two people working in the arts and just listening to their stories and about their sorrows. And I realized all the time that during this pandemic, especially people working in the arts are losing part of their identity, especially the younger ones, because they do not know if their job will be there, if theaters will be reopened. So for many people, it means that you lose your dream, that you have to reschedule your life. So in this time, in this season, this is what I see as my calling as a pastor, for being with people from the arts. And I hope that the relationship that we built during this time can join us in the next chapter. But now this is what needs to be done.
Yeah.
And I would just add to that. I think certainly the arts, man. I also have seen how much the suffering that is going on from artists, and they will need our support more than ever once we come out of this. But to add to that, when you were talking about being with when it comes to culture, I think it means that we need to be curious. That I need to be open and curious, and just a curiosity. There is such wisdom when Jesus was talking about you must be like a little child. They saw the enchantment of the world. They saw everything with curious eyes. And so, Dean, when I look at Johannesburg and the culture, and you're talking about the music, and I'm thinking about like, yeah, I've seen those only in movies. I've never been there, but I totally want to see that. And it just brings this reality of, I wish I knew more, right? So that curiosity is about being with. It's not about, let me tell you how I am better or how you can learn from my culture, but rather tell me about your culture. That sounds so interesting and so amazing, and I want to just learn. So we just need to be more curious, and I think that is within us. I just think we sometimes like, oh, it's not polite to do that, or to we just, I don't know what we buy into, but we don't do it. And we need to go back to the, I am curious about your food. I am curious about this. Tell me more about you. And that I think is being with when it comes to culture.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying, you're drawing from a statement you made earlier, Tim, where you say we need to meet people where they are. You know, ours should not be to transform other people's cultures, but to meet them where they are, so that it should be contrary to the colonialism project, where if only if you behave like us or you look like us, it's worth it. But where you are, where God has put you, I must be able to minister in that context.
Yes.
And there's
Very well-
one
well
critical
said.
question from a young person. Sorry, Tim.
Yeah, I think you said it very well. Let me briefly tell this story. I'm deeply humbled by the fact that since a couple of years there is every Good Friday a national program on Dutch television. It's called The Passion. It's a British concept, and the biggest musical stars of this secular country are singing out the best known secular hymns to explain the Jesus story. So everything that I would see as popular culture, something for only for the theaters and so on, it's spot on. The communicating of the gospel. The church is also paying for this production because it's the biggest sermon that we have, with millions and millions of people watching this from their sofas in their houses. Now, I studied the biblical text to apply them and to apply them all over again, and I think there's some good in this, but I learned that if you just make space for popular culture in itself, the Holy Spirit can do amazing things.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely sure.
Yeah. There's a very important question. I think this one, I'm sure, is from the young people. When you look in the context of congregations, inclusive approaches to liturgy and worship. And it says, following on from being with question, how can young people really be taken seriously in how liturgy is offered? Through being with the young people's lens, what can clergy do to lower the barriers that seems to be there? To explain the question a little bit more, there is a feeling among some of the young people in our context that the liturgy in its nature is actually particularly exclusive and therefore does not accommodate young people or take young people seriously. Under the rubric of being with, how do we make sure that young people are taken seriously in our worship and the way we produce our liturgy?
Let me try to answer this. Oh, sorry, Lorenzo, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Tim.
Let me answer to try this. Let me try to answer this question on a kid's level, because I'm the father of two kids of 9 and 6. One of the things that work really well in our context is a format that is called cradling church. And it starts with bring a bunch of young kids around the table and let them do what they like to do. They make a painting, they make a drawing, or whatever, and use some elements of Christianity to weave that into what's going on. So you can tell a short story, you can put on light on a candle, you can do a short prayer, but everything what happens is just cradling. And there are parents in the room, and there are grandparents in the room. In several Protestant churches where there were no kids anymore, they started with a concept like this, and to their surprise, all sorts of people showed up, because every parent and every grandparent is having a good time when his or her kids are having a good time. And if the church is willing to create a liturgy which is exactly this basic level, very well designed for kids, amazing things can happen. And if you do that, if you can do that for kids, I'm sure you can do that for every age of life.
Yeah.
We actually, we're doing an experiment in Chicago, in Illinois, here in the United States, where we are going to a congregation to reimagine their youth ministry. And the way we're doing it is by sitting that we're following a process called design thinking, which is an innovative way of creating new products and everything. And it's very much used in the business industry. But we're taking that and we're using that process with young people in this congregation to say, we believe the creed. And that's we need to keep that in. But other than that, let's talk about everything else. What's important to you? What's not important to you? I think so many times we have been known as the church that says no. Kids come with an idea and we're like, nope, that's not going to work. No, let me tell you why that won't work. Nope, 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 and no. And what if we became the church that said yes? Let's try it. What if we just go out and try that? Why not add a clown? Whatever it might be that I'm not saying that young people want clowns in church, but that's why I'm there. No, but whatever it might be that they might want, that we seriously consider it. That Dean, you said it in your question. We take them seriously. We take their spiritual yearning seriously. We take seriously that the Spirit is also in them, and that whatever the request is, that God is in there too. And so let's work to that. So that's what we're hoping to do, and to redevelop what their youth ministry might look like.
I think in my context, I will take a more radical approach and say to young people, don't wait for liturgies to be written for you. Produce your own liturgies as young people and take the church over. Let's not wait for others to write these liturgies. Let's just empower you to produce what an inclusive young people taste or young liturgy looks like. We're not going to produce it for you as adults. So young people, take it and do it yourself. I want to, sadly, time is always an enemy. But I want you to give me your closing remarks, your last words. But I'm hoping you could draw from what you said, Reverend Lorenzo. HeartEdge is a global network of churches. It is about learning from each other. What I personally believe in is ministry of exposure, which means you will always grow from being exposed to different contexts and situations. What message do you want to leave us today under this global network, learning from each other, ministry of exposure, under the rubric of HeartEdge?
Yeah, thank you, Dean. And thank you for having me. I think it's important to remember that the biblical witness has Jesus Christ sending the disciples out 2 by 2. There is a reason for this. There will be times in any of us who are either living a life or doing ministry where it will seem long and it will seem painful. And it's like, oh my God, are we ever going to get anywhere with this? And that's when you need someone that can hold you up. And that's what HeartEdge does. It is other people who are like you, who are thinking like you, who hold you up and say, let's do this together. We don't have to do it alone. If you're thinking of doing ministry differently, if you're thinking of trying to find the Spirit in different ways, let's all go and do that together. And that's what this movement does, so that you don't have to do it alone, so that when it seems particularly hard, somebody else can hold you up, so that when the joys come, we can joyfully rejoice together. And so that at the end of the day, we can live God's future now, because that is our mandate from God.
Reverend Tim.
Thanks for having me, Dean. It's a great pleasure. HeartEdge has been very rewarding for me to be part of this movement over the last couple of years. I'm surprised by 3 things. The first is how rapidly it grows, how rapidly this movement spreads, also across the Netherlands, across the US, and I'm hoping that I'm expecting that it will flourish as well in South Africa. Secondly, I'm surprised how encouraging it is to find brothers and sisters across the world in a simple way like this. Everybody has Zoom on his desktop, or at least a smartphone, and we can easily set up a good conversation on a Sunday afternoon. To me, it's always encouraging to see other voices, to hear other voices, to see other faces, based on the same foundations, and have the possibility to share a little bit of your belief. So it doesn't take time. It doesn't take your energy, it brings your energy. And the third thing that surprised me all the time in the HeartEdge network is there is always some good theology in it. It's never without, and we all know that there is a lot of boring theology. So with good theology, I mean theology that's not boring. There are always elements in every conversation, in every little article, but it's always targeted on the practical field. It's not for studies, it's for the streets and for our projects and how to run the next stage of your project. And that's exactly the combination that I'm longing for. And I hope that many more friends will join us in the next couple of years. And let's wait and see what God will do.
I want to thank you, brothers, for making the time to join us today. Let the HeartEdge network continue to grow as we learn from each other. I want to remind all of you, brothers and sisters, as well, who are participating. Thank you very much for being in the journey with us. I want to remind you of the book, A Future That's Bigger Than the Past by Dr. Samuels. It goes more in details with the conversation we've been having. It is available as an ebook with 50% discount. I'd like to encourage you to actually get it. Thank you to the technical team, AJ behind the scenes, Trish behind the scenes, and all the teams that work behind the scenes who have made this possible. But more so, thank you to the HeartEdge network. Thank you to St. Martin's in the Fields, the Cathedral of St. Mary the Virgin in Johannesburg, for making it possible for us to have these Lenten conversations. And this is not the end. Post-Lent, we shall continue with our conversations with young people, experiences. So keep the space, keep watching. HeartEdge is growing, and we will grow and be enriched together with you. May God bless you all. Have a blessed Holy Week, blessed Easter, and may the risen Christ continue to take you to higher bounds. Thank you very much. May God bless you.